Hello YouTube, welcome to part 2 of this Hornby Terrier modification. As you can see, it's developed quite quickly and it's changed appearance quite quickly as well. So I've done a lot of hard work over this week to try and get it to a point where I'm quite happy with it. So we'll go back to the front end and I'll talk you through all the changes that I've made. I've taken loads of pictures, so I'll be whacking them up on Flickr when I've finished. But I'll show you and talk you through the various bits I've added since I last spoke on this video. So since I last added on the last part, as you can see now it's completely changed. So a 3D printed smoke box, this is Mark II. I've had to change a few bits. I've still got to modify a little bit on this one for clearance around the wheels, but Mark II worked really nicely. I had to change underneath to allow the body to fit on the chassis. That's been changed, so this is Mark II smoke box on the actual locomotive now. It's still the original chimney, which fits nicely into the top, but I will be making changes to this chimney as well, as I've got an order with Shapeways to replace the top copper painted cap on this. So I've tried to print something in bronze, which is the first metal I've ever printed in, which has a very high copper content. So I'm hoping it will look pretty good, like a polished copper top on the chimneys. So hopefully if that's successful, I'll make it available on Shapeways. It's not cheap, but I'm hoping it will increase the sort of look of it, I would say. But apart from that, the smoke box change or swap went reasonably well. I cut it off with a circular cutting disc on a Dremel very carefully, but I gave myself a little bit of margin, so I cut most of it off, avoided the splashes, unscrewed the smoke box and pulled it off, just leaving the rest of the boiler and a few other bits and pieces, and then I could work on the splashes individually and reshape them, as you can see on here. Not quite finished, as they still need a bit of paint, but you can see all the transplantation, I guess you could say, from the original smoke box. The lubricator pots on the side of the saddle. I've added a new smoke box turned brass dart on the front. I've also taken the original handrail off the previous smoke box and put it on this one, and also the lamp iron on the top. And as I say, the chimney is the original as well. The splashes, I've had to chop off the sandboxes and add some plastic iron on the front. You can just see a bit of white coming through on the paint there, where I've had to add an extra section to make it the same as the previous part, if you like, behind it, so it's nice and curved over. The smoke box has just had a bit of paint, matte black paint, and the smoke box door cleaned and put on and glued in place. You can also see some pipe work, but before that I'll show you the more difficult bit. So the bit I was dreading was moving the dome. As I mentioned, previous Terriers and later Terriers have the dome forward of the position that this model was in, so I had to move it 3mm forwards towards the chimney, and I was dreading it because colour matching and trying to hide it the best I could, just to not show too much of the works going on. I think I've just about got away with it. So basically what I've done is taken a very sharp craft knife, gone along the edges of the boiler and cut the dome and the safety valves out in one section. Then I've chopped out another bit 3mm forwards and moved it all along, glued it back in place, and then the extra bits that had been cut out or lost during the cutting process I've put back in with plasticard and wet and dry sanded it back so it's flat, and then came the colour. Now the colour on this model is not correct according to the paint specialists of Phoenix. Phoenix say the colours on these are wrong. They should be a more beigey brown, which Phoenix do have, but unfortunately it doesn't match this colour on this model. So I decided to try and mix my own. Never worked. Got close but not spot on. So I remember reading an article somewhere a very long time ago about colour mixing and matching at B&Q. So I took the cab to B&Q to get colour matched, and I picked, I think it was the silk version, which is a slightly smoother finish, and they mixed it for me in 2 minutes, and it cost me £3, and it matches perfectly. You can see on here, you cannot see any paint difference around that area at all. So that's pretty good for £3. I mean, I could have spent 9, 10, 12 quid on paint colours and trying to mix my own. So if anyone wants to paint their bedroom in improved engine green, then it should be on the database at B&Q, if that's what you fancy. But other than that, the colour matching is great. So maybe we can get a library on B&Q's paint store so we can have all the locomotive colours available to us. But it works really well, and the colour match is really good. But you can see, if I rotate a little bit more, you can see the dome has moved forward, because it was the middle of it was about here, but it's now moved forward of that position and all blended in. It's done a little bit of work to do around there, but overall it's not too bad. So what you can also see on here is the additional pipe work, which is running along the top and onto the boiler. I've used some O-gauge handrail holders or knobs. There's 3 of them, although the third one isn't there at the moment. So I've got one going up here, curving round, piece of 0.3mm brass wire going towards the cab, which will go in the holes, which is still in the front of the cab, and the same on the other side. So that's all worked quite nicely. They need to be blackened up a little bit to blend in. Also added on the underside, although not quite finished yet, are the sand boxes. Now there's still two holes to locate the sand boxes underneath this model, so if Hornby ever do supply the sand boxes and sand pipes as a spare part, then we can swap them over. So that's they say they're not going to do it, but unfortunately the only way I can do it is to 3D print my own. So these are now painted up and glued on the underneath, on the rear there, and also on the front. You can just about see there. So they're all ready to go, and they just need some brass wire in now to finish. Also painted the cab floor brown, just to give it a bit more colour and a little bit more interesting to look at. And as you probably saw in the last shot, the cab was missing, and here it is. Now there's been a lot of work on this as well, filling holes and taking off the pumps. So on this side you can see I have now taken off the pump and used B&Q's colour matching paint on this as well, and it's come out quite nicely. I still need to remove the number, which I may or may not do depending if the plate covers it. The bunker is not glued on, it is just fixed on with some blue tack at the moment. But overall it's come out quite nicely. You can see I've filled the hole on the back where the original lamp bracket was, and I still need to add the guard irons on the back for the windows. But overall, you can see on the inside there 2 white spots of plastic rod, which I did have to open up the holes where the pump was to 1.6 millimeters and fit it with evergreen plastic rod, which is glued in place and then painted over on the outside, which still needs a bit of paint on the inside. But overall, that's going quite well. You can see all the holes on the top or the front of the cab, where most of them will now be filled with various new bits and pieces. Moving on to the chassis, this is the whole chassis. You can see here the motor and the 6-pin chip. The only small change on here has been the brakes. As you can see, they're no longer the wooden brake blocks. They are now upgraded to a spare part, which should be the same on the BR and Southern models or variations. These are still not correct for what is on Stepney at the moment, but lacking anything of the correct type, I'm going to have to use whatever's closest. So this is the closest, and they've been fitted and the rigging changed over from the original. So that was quite a straightforward swap and took a few hours to do, but overall we're going in the right direction. So in the next week or two, hopefully it'll be in one piece. Let's hope.